Buddy, to episode 8 of See You at Mike's. Very special benchmark episode. You might notice that alongside your 3 hosts, we have our very first guest, Mr. Benjamin Schleicher. I'm Trevor Binstock.
I'm Tyler Joseph Swarlowski.
I'm Prem.
Nice. Awesome.
All right, Prem, do you want to introduce Ben a little bit and kind of talk about why we have him on?
Yeah. So, we've known Ben for a while now, throughout middle school, high school, etc., etc. I shared. I think Ben, maybe we might have been on the same youth soccer team at one point, maybe like in Sunflake, and you swam, and you were always very fast, and I was always very envious. And Ben, I've followed his Instagram account for, I guess since then. And Ben has, I don't know when he first started really getting into photography, but Ben is this very outdoorsy, nature-loving person. And I feel like Ben is a good role model in just getting a very newfound and intimate relationship with the planet and the world and the natural world. And you also love taking pictures of all of it. And I think you're very good at it. And one thing that I've always, me, Trevor, and Swat have been thinking about, like, who should we have on? Who would be interesting to talk to? Who do we just like? You and our friend Romel, who unfortunately couldn't be here, are both just very sweet and amazing people that are generally just very well-liked people from my experience, and are also very, very invested in photography. And I thought of you because I feel like, when you post pictures, you always have these very meaningful or thought out captions to them, like very reflective words that I feel like I just hear you kind of dictating as you're sort of uploading the photos. And I feel like it's been like a sort of window into, like, just your life a bit, considering like that's been my most ongoing connection with you, is just like looking at your photos. And I found it interesting. I feel like there have been certain ways that I feel like those captions have kind of evolved and changed a bit. Like I feel like they've kind of reflected just like your state of mind and your way of being in the time. So we figured this would just be a fun thing to talk about, just broadly, your evolving relationship with photography, what first got you into it, what's sort of keeping you hooked on the line now, and how that's kind of reflected not just, your relationship with photography, but also just your life, your relationship with other people around you, your relationship with the planet. So that's what I hope we can talk about. But Ben, if there's anything else you'd just like to say about yourself, like where you are, what you're doing, what you've been up to, I think that would be good for folks to know since high school.
Yeah, for sure. Well, first, thank you for actually reading my captions. Sometimes I feel like I just put out these like long, drawn out, reflections and deep thoughts I put a lot of time in, and sometimes I feel like people just like it and move on to the next picture. And so when I've had people comment like, oh, like great pictures, also love your words, they're very thought out, like means the world to me, because like half of why I take pictures is so I can pull out deeper meanings that I find in the environment around me. So and that's what I want people to get from my photography. And I think that's something that has developed over time. At first it was like this creative outlet for me that I've always had and desired. And it's come into something more like, how can I use this to bring about or bring people on this journey with me to like see and appreciate the environment and the beauty of it and its value. So I think that would kind of sum up my my evolved approach to photography, for sure, since I really started, which was my freshman year of college.
Righteous. And then, so we're all from Grand Forks, and you're in Bozeman right now. How did you end up in Bozeman after graduating?
Right. Well, I actually lived there my freshman year of college, and then moved back home. Just financially, it was pretty hard. Didn't know what I wanted to do for school. Had a lot more connections back home. Um, and then so finished my undergraduate at University of North Dakota. Looking to move because I missed the mountains
Yeah.
a lot, and so I applied anywhere and everywhere that had mountains, and happened to find a job in Bozeman at a coffee shop. So that's what I'm doing now.
Nice. Nice.
What's your coffee of choice, Ben?
I'm just a regular black coffee, nice long process of a pour over usually is the way to go for me.
I was about to say, yeah, you and Trevor probably get along quite well then. I feel like Trevor, you can speak for yourself, but my own caffeine extent is just if I'm feeling really crazy, I'll get a mocha. That's as far as I'll stray from a hot chocolate. So I'm not into like all the sugary, like crazy stuff, but like if I'm getting something, it's got to be a chocolate coffee, aka mocha.
Yeah.
I mean, what else? I love the smell, but just never really got into the whole drinking part of coffee.
I just upgraded my coffee game to an AeroPress, and that's how I'm making it now. So it's a little bit more in touch with like just more things going on that you can control and how the cup of coffee turns out. Like I'll have one, I'm like, oh, I push this one down a little too far. It's a little over extracted. I can start like getting a feel for those things instead of just pressing the button on my Keurig and buying the grounds. And those are like, there's one variable. It's just the grounds that I buy, honestly. Say, I wanted to mention this real quick. Ben, I just ran into Derek at Bully Brew not too long ago, probably like a few weeks ago. And so Ben's older brother, Derek Schleicher, and he used to be my soccer coach, so I know him more formally as Schleichs. And he is, because what's he studying? It's like wilderness, what's it called? Or whatever he was in Idaho for studying, and now he's back here just because of COVID and everything. So this sort of like love for just being outdoors and spending your time like in nature and like cool scenery definitely seems to run in the family.
Definitely. And my brother, I think, will find the smallest details about nature to love about. Like he'll see insects on the trail and like shuffle them off so they don't get stepped on, or he loves birds and and like just little plants and I'm like, I love that about him, and whenever I'm with him it's very eye-opening to see him look so intricately at each part of nature. But I usually see it as a whole, where he sees it as all these little parts that
I was thinking about that. Sorry, I was at Yellowstone recently, like less than a month ago. I went to Yellowstone, and I was given the camera to take pictures of everything. And I noticed that I was taking pictures of like lichen on the bark of trees and just like one single leaf. And someone was like, "Why aren't you taking pictures of like what's going on here?" I was like, "This is what's going on, and it's all going on." And so like I was very much in the micro, whereas another person who had wanted the camera was very macro. And do you feel like that's the relationship between you guys, where like you're the more macro whole thing? Because your pictures are of the mountains, and they're mind-blowing. It's so cool.
Yeah, I think that's what I like try to capture. Behind the scenes, like I definitely notice those little things, like I always talk about like the wind in the trees or the trickling of water. Like those are like very small things that I take notice when I'm out, which is like why I go out and take pictures, is to encounter those things. But my pictures are like try to encompass all of that. But my brother, just we've grown up camping together since I was 4. We're 4 years apart. He's always been very keen on recognizing just the very small details of nature.
Where do you think your and your brother's relationships with nature even come from? Like it's one thing just for like siblings to like kind of be outdoorsy and care about nature, but particularly this sort of complementary nature where, you know, you're kind of appreciating like this broad landscape in front of you, and he's kind of, you know, moving the bugs so they don't get stepped on. Where does this come from?
Yeah, I think, well, we've been exposed to it since, like I said, we were very young. We started going into the boundary waters in northern Minnesota, both at the age of 4. That's where kind of our first love was kindled for just nature and the environment and being outside. But I think that was fostered in us. But I think our temperaments and our personalities kind of cling on to that kind of stuff more. Like it's like daily where it's like I need to get outside and just be outside. That's just like more of my temperament and my personality. And nature's like that outlet for me. And then also like I have to give credit to my parents because they live very non-busy lives. Like things and materials were just not really important. It was more of like go out and find what makes you happy and fulfilled and focus on that. And so I think that's part of it too. So I had that kind of 3-factor influence of, you know, my dad exposing me to the environment and nature, and then my temperament and personality, and then just the way that I was raised to just appreciate the little things and the small things.
I'm curious because one thing I've kind of read and like I haven't been too meticulous with this, but I feel like earlier on in your photos, you seem to be a bit more religious and pious in like your captions. And I feel like that has decreased in a certain way. Like, do you feel like your religious background and your spiritual experience with the world has been impacted through your photography or through like the process, or have those kind of just been tandem evolutions? And what was sort of your spiritual and religious sort of connection with the world before you started photography? Like I could just kind of want to get to know this evolution more.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I think, I don't know. It's like you're right in the way that you've noticed how my posts about religion, especially very much Christianity oriented, that's changed a lot and decreased a lot. And I don't know how much of photography actually, I don't know how much of that contributed to the decrease. I don't think it really did. It was more of just, sorry, I'm gonna
No problem.
shift over to the boxes, change the background a little bit. I think a lot of, so photography has always kind of been my way to process and share my emotions, and my thoughts, um, and then so yes, I was very very much involved in the Christian faith, and I'm still very like inclined to it, but I think just the last couple of years I've started to almost draw away from it a little bit, for various reasons, and a lot of it had to do with like personal transformation. So a lot of what I was learning, a lot of learning what I was learning about myself. Just I started to see the world around me a lot differently, see people and different religions around me a lot differently. And so that kind of evolved over a couple of years. And then what resulted was like where I'm at now is seeing not things just from one perspective of like, let's say Christianity, but now it's turned into something of like, we are all on this planet together as humans, and we all have, you know, as different as we are, we have these same like conscious processes, and you know, we can still interact with the world in the same way. And so that kind of opened my eyes to that there's so much truth to be found in just nature itself that I don't need religion to, or just a singular religion or singular viewpoint to see that. I can be seen from multiple perspectives. So
yeah, wow.
Do you feel like so you talk about moving away from this certain conception or notion of Christianity that you've kind of held before. Do you feel like you still hold a lot of the, or some of the values imbued within it, just like the sort of formal establishment you've moved away from, or has some of this also been a sort of shifting or reformulation of the beliefs too?
I think both. Yeah, there's definitely been a reshifting and a reevaluating of my beliefs, and not just accepting certain things just because that's what I've been told. So starting to think for myself. And then, what was the first part you said?
I think no, you're on the right thread there. Just about like because some of it is moving away from the establishment, and then
yeah, and then I think I've grown to just have a harder relationship with religion as religion. And I think over time it's just become like a difficult place to actually grow as an individual. But I still hold on to very dearly a lot of the Christian values, a lot of the just core beliefs are still there. It's just religion in and of itself has been grown to be more difficult, which is part of why I've started to step back a little bit.
Yeah. Do you feel like you're moving towards something more than you're moving away from what you were, or do you conceptualize it in that like I'm leaving this thing?
Yeah, I think it's again both. Like there's a part of me that feels like I have to move away from this for a while to at least grow in the direction that I am going. And I do feel myself going in the direction. And I think since I've started to remove myself a little bit, I've just become more in touch with who I am as an individual. I've felt very much more connected in my faith and spiritually. I feel very much stronger in that regards. And so there's like this movement away and a movement towards something greater. So a lot of personal transformation.
Wow.
I have a question.
Yeah, go.
It's getting off this current topic. We can definitely come back to it. So I was just me looking at like your posts and like your photography and stuff. Obviously, when you're living in Bozeman, like you are now, it's easier to go out and find mountains, more readily. But it always just seemed to me as like Ben spends so much time outside, and like to get like the shots that he does, probably it's not something you can just kind of pop out onto like the bike path and like do it. I was like, it's like you really design your time and like your prioritization of time around being in nature. And it seems different, like unconventional to most people. I think you hear people's relationship with nature a lot is like, I just don't have the time. Like I try to take vacations and go see like nice spots. But you said when we were talking about you and Derek too, you were like, I think, since we were kids, like with our parents and everything, we just have started this relationship that's a lot less with like the material world and more with the natural world, which was like a good answer to that. So can you just talk on a little bit like how you think that the way you prioritize time and like the way that you spend it might differ from, like a big chunk of the population that just has like anxiety towards spending too much time like away from the office, or not away from responsibilities, but just not like staring at them all the time.
Yeah, I think, well, part of it is I do have a lot of time to go out, more than the average person. So I will own up to that. But I also like structure my life in a way to be out in nature, as part of like necessity. Like you structure your day so you can go to bed at, 9 p.m., 10 p.m. because you sleep out of necessity. You set up times to eat because eating is a necessity. And for me, for like my emotional and spiritual and mental health, setting up time to be out in nature as much as I can is like a necessity to my spiritual, mental, and spiritual health, and physical, because I'm doing physical activity. And so I think it really comes down to like an individual's needs and priorities of what brings the most meaning and joy to their life, and well-being. I think well-being is something that's very overlooked because it's this fine balance that we have to create in our lives to have well-being. If we're working 60 hours a week, it's pretty lopsided, and your overall well-being might not be the healthiest. And for me, that like a well-balanced and having a good well-being requires a lot of time outside. So
Yeah, well.
Yeah, that's buff.
I was curious about how you felt about like vulnerability in terms of the pictures that you're putting out. I mean, are pictures of mountains, but the sort of reflections that you're attaching to these through your words, through the captions of the posts, seem very vulnerable, very, very open. And I'm curious, vulnerability is like a huge deal to me. I'm curious of where you view that in like your photography and your online journey and life in general, of like how naked do you feel putting up a picture with a caption like that?
Yeah, I think considering all the thoughts I have and all the thoughts that I want to share, I probably feel halfway dressed most of the time, for how much I don't share of my thoughts. And yeah, like there's a part of like there's definitely some vulnerability that goes into my posts, but there's a lot behind that I'm reluctant to share, or I refrain from sharing. I guess sometimes out of fear or offending people. So just being pretty careful and particular about what I do share. So, but I think a lot of what I want to share is something that's going to help someone, and not just me putting about a bunch of thoughts and feelings and then somebody not really getting anything from it. So I try to find a balance of like, what can I share where someone can actually extrapolate something from it into their own life. So
do you feel like, because this first part you're describing is just sort of like the extent of your nakedness, but there's also whether like you're dressing up whatever you're dressed up in, like do you feel like any of your reflections or meditations are kind of like how not only vulnerable, but how sort of straightforward do you think you're being? Do you think you're kind of putting out exactly what you're thinking, or kind of formulating them in a way to either, I don't know, feel more approachable, or feel like kind of tempering your thoughts a bit? Like, do you feel like you do that at all?
Right. Yeah, there definitely is some tempering for some posts. But a lot of times, like I'll post something and I'll feel just like kind of dumb for putting it out there. But but it's like like when you are vulnerable and when you are sharing stuff like that, you're gonna feel pretty uncomfortable. And so I think I've had the most feedback from those posts than I do with ones where I'm more some more of my tamed posts. So I guess it's a work in progress on my part to just be more vulnerable in my posts. Because I've definitely seen some feedback from it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The in terms of like half nakedness, right? Well, what do you see that other half as? Do you see that still as yourself, or is that something else? I guess that's kind of like the question that Prem asked. But like,
okay,
what is the function of still being half dressed? Like,
yeah, it's a deep question.
You know, like here's an answer. Like I can understand. I like to make music. I've never put anything out there, but like the music when I feel naked is scary. And so the like half dressed is like the armor for against the amount of scariness that it takes. And I'm just curious about, you know, I think a lot about what is the cost of armoring? What is the cost of feeling secure and not being afraid? Because we often think about the cost of being vulnerable, that it's scary, that you can be hurt. But we don't often consider the thoughts and the cost of being invulnerable. And what are you giving up through armoring yourself?
Yeah. I guess it's not something I've really thought about a whole lot. I think, yeah, there's definitely a side of me that, like, I sometimes don't like to, like, tap into myself sometimes just because I can put me down some huge rabbit holes.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that can be part of the cost is like getting kind of hung up on these concepts and ideas. And, you know, they can be hard, like on you, like mentally and
Yeah.
spiritually, if you really dig into some of those. And then I'll pull from like my like psychology background is we have this need to be consistent to those around us in our relationships. And so I think that comes into play as well because I do have so many relationships and connections through Instagram where like there is a part of me that doesn't like I have this need to be consistent as people who know me and who I am. So that's also another part of it where there's that kind of voice in the back of your head.
Is it like when I think about that, I think about if I have gone to a restaurant. Oh no, here's a legit one. I was really into deviled eggs one Thanksgiving when I was real young, like middle school, and now my family believes wholeheartedly that I am obsessed with deviled eggs, and if they are not at a holiday, that I will freak out. And so I have to continue to love deviled eggs because of that. When I don't, I enjoy the deviled eggs. It's whatever. But every time they don't make deviled eggs, and they're like, Tyler, I'm so sorry. We didn't make deviled eggs. We didn't have time. I was like, I don't care about the deviled eggs. What are you talking about? Is
yeah,
it kind of like that?
That's like exactly it, but on a very deeper level. Like we have this need to have this consistency, and I've seen it play out in my own life where with my transformation as an individual the past 2 years of what I was talking about earlier, I started to, you know, kind of step back a little bit and start to see things differently. And, you know, that was inconsistent from what I was prior to that. And what evolved from that were like relationships transformed and looked differently after that. You know, they just weren't the same. And because I had grown in a different direction. And so I think when I say like, there's part of me that's half clothed, that's like a fear of mine, is like some of those things will get broken.
Wow.
You know, if you undress the other half of yourself, and because I've seen it play out in my life.
Yeah, for sure. I'm very much the type of person where I'm excited. Oh, I cut out a little bit. I'll just chill. Am I back?
You're very much the type of person that
I'm very much the type of person that loves to help people realize their like full nakedness, their full potential as a vulnerable being. And so I know in my head, when I get apologized to for not making deviled eggs, if I'm not in a good headspace, I feel like I'm not being heard anymore. I feel like I'm not understood. And like Christmas gifts, there was one time, I think it was 2 or 3 Christmases ago, where I got a whole bunch of like hippie books. And I was like, okay, they finally kind of understand that I'm at least a weirdo. Like, they understand that I'm not normal. And that felt great. And it was kind of like a vulnerable thing for both them and us, of them like giving up some sort of conception of myself, but also creating a new one of a hippie weirdo. But at least it was more adjacent instead of the Tyler that they thought I was this whole entire time.
the Tyler that consistently ate deviled eggs
Every single time. And so I get excited about what's on the other side of those fears. Like, let's see if these relationships do burn down and break because of your nakedness. And in my experience as a being trying to be naked, is that on the other side of the nakedness is an experience where the relationships transform in a way that creates something new. And whatever was broken before, it doesn't even need to be a part of it anymore.
Yeah, that's a good thought. Do you feel like the relationships that have been established through that are much stronger than ones where you were, I guess, sort of half closed, if we're going to continue on this analogy?
Yeah, we're keeping it.
Dude, anything about getting naked, I'm in.
I'd like to offer like a possible benefit to sort of like keeping your skivvies on, and what you put out there. So let's say in Ben's situation, where you have your photographs that you post on social media, and then you have like the caption, sort of like the thoughts that go along with it. And Ben, like you said, you want people to be able to take something from that, like read it, and there'd be something there for people to gain from reading it. Like, I say in that sense, and if you have like hundreds of followers, you kind of want to take it down, like filter it so that it's the most palatable to the most people. Like it still has to be specific enough to be impactful, but if you go like too far, too naked with it, you might like pinhole some of your followers from like gaining anything or like seeing its value. If that makes sense. Obviously that was like a statement on your behalf, so you have to tell me if that's true or not.
Yeah, that's a good thought. And like I really don't care about followers or likes. A lot of what I do is for me. And even the stuff I write is for me, just because like I need to put these ideas and thoughts out, because a lot of times I have all these thoughts and ideas and they just sit in my head and kind of brute for a really long time, and like I have to get them out. And so it's my way of like meditating and journaling. But if people come alongside and like, hey, this is kind of cool, and they like it, sweet. But I do have that like understanding, like there are people out there reading it. So like sometimes there are some things where, like I do need to keep my undergarments on for some of my thoughts.
So
like
three quarters.
3/4.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I guess it would just depend on your purpose. I mean, I feel like we feel similar to you, Ben, in that like what we're doing here. Like SWAT initially got our ears on this because he's at the contemplation center right now, and he's doing a lot of contemplating and a lot of thinking and a lot of reading. And he's like, hey, I wanna have an outlet for all this. Yeah. So that's why we're doing this. But like it's pretty similar to you that this is a space for us, and like if people like it, sweet. But if not, like it's gonna keep just happening. Like as Trevor said, it was week 8. Like it'll be week 800, and it might still just be like 10 people watching. So I think we kind of jibe with that.
Right.
Yeah.
I guess it's a spectrum, I suppose, of how undressed you get. I guess depending on just your comfort level. But I do feel like if you are one, not you as in you, Ben, but you, just any person, is someone who is doing it kind of for their own sake. And if people like it, they like it. If people don't, they don't. And you're not like necessarily like marketing something. Then, I just take them off, baby, like, because if it's for you,
yeah.
I mean, I feel like generally like us three so far in this stream, we've been pretty wide open, I'd say. I mean, perhaps like there's things like within each of our minds that like we don't bring up, like a specific topic or something that like for us personally is taboo, but like with what's come up so far, we're kind of forthright, I feel. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
I think about like when I have a concept of an audience, like if we're doing this show and I have a concept of an audience, immediately my mind starts to go to what is the most marketable version of me, and like where can I extract value out of myself to show other people that I am worth listening to, I'm worth looking at, I'm worth doing any of these things. And at those moments, I really do feel lost in this sort of sauce of clothes. Like, when I can get naked and the sort of system of value of like no longer being afraid of not being marketable enough to have people want to listen to me or have any sort of like monopoly over someone's thinking mind. Oh shit, totally lost that train of thought. But basically, like, I confronted myself on if I am doing this in a pure of heart where I'm telling the truth and I'm being open and willing to live in this world and accepting of what is, then I am allowed to be fully naked, and whatever happens, I'll take it. And so it is only when the endeavor becomes a sort of like ego world endeavor of maybe this could become something that I start to think as the marketable version of Tyler.
I mean, it's also just like a natural thing too, like regardless of like workplace or not, like there's politics to everything, like, and interpersonal relations, and you want to be liked, you want to be the best you at all times, or like the best you insofar as like we're naturally chameleons, like you want to be the best you in someone's conception of you, like because we know everyone else has their own like interests and things that they like, you want to like play to those. So of course this goes beyond just like if you're a photographer or a bunch of hooligan streamers that like, want, even if like it's for you, you still of course like kind of want, people to appreciate them in a certain way. Like this goes beyond that, like just you being a person that wants to be liked, like this is an ongoing imperative or a problem that we face.
But it seems through like Ben's captions and his pictures that through nature, I'll speak for you, Ben, and then you can tell me if I'm full of shit.
We're all just speaking for Ben today.
Yeah. Welcome to the podcast where we'll speak for you. You don't have to do anything.
Yeah. So here's what Ben's thinking when he writes his caption.
It seems as
we're
though
changing this to Ben-splaining.
Yeah. It seems through your captions, at least this is my reaction to the thoughts I have about your captions. That's a better way to put it. Is that you have seen a world that is outside of the value relationships through nature and through photography. You've seen a space where value, competition, and sort of the separateness of our identities isn't required and isn't even a part of the equation at all. And it is only through this sort of process of sharing it that the need for any armor comes up. Because when you're looking at a tree, you don't need any armor. When you're taking a picture, you don't need any armor. But when you're showing someone and telling someone, you're going to feel like you need armor.
Mm.
But if it is true that we are a part of this thing, and when we feel closely connected to this thing, armor is not needed, then gall darn, it probably should be true that you don't need any armor when you're sharing it either.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's a good insight. Definitely. I would say you're pretty accurate in that analysis.
Thank you. I'm glad I could speak your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, it's not really something that I really recognized or saw that way. But now that you say it, it's more clear. So
one thing you said earlier is how, as you've been shifting from your religious background prior to your experiences with nature, you said that you began or are beginning to see how you can see truths within nature, truths that perhaps prior you would have had to have engaged with or learned from a religion. That nature in a way is kind of like your religious experience now. What are some of these truths that you're seeing in nature? I think Swa was kind of teasing out his interpretation of some of these truths, but when you think of the truths you see in nature, and these can be anything, this is not a leading question, just when you look at nature and your experiences with nature, what have you felt that you've learned, and also perhaps seen that, Christianity didn't need to tell me this or that, or Christianity actually didn't tell me this, but I can see it in nature.
Right. Yeah, I think one thing I've come to realize is that we all have this need within ourselves for beauty. And beauty can be seen in so many different ways. It can be seen in a story. It can be seen in personal relationships. But we all have this need, and I see it in nature, this beauty, and it's this thing of need. But I feel like this thing of beauty, with the concept of a God who would create beautiful and perfect things, would create something beautiful. And so through conscious experience, we experience things that are beautiful. And in a sense, we're getting in touch or coming to recognize a part or a characteristic of, let's say, a creator. And I think what some religions teach is that the only way to a creator is through this specific doctrine, this specific set of religious practices. And from what I've seen is that people can experience, let's say, God or the divine, or just be spiritual through things that are of nature, because it's universal. Just because I'm Christian doesn't mean my brain's wired a different way than someone who is Muslim. We all have these similar experiences with nature that's been created. So I see this world as a place where we can whatever religion we have, we can go out and encounter things of beauty and have experience with the divine.
Yeah, that makes me think about my experience of like, so I dropped out of college after my freshman year, and I, like kind of like the goal was after I dropped out of college was to like become an enlightened being, like get in a rocket and blast off, never come back. Sayonara, I'm enlightened. And obviously it
That's
didn't work
different.
like that.
That is different than the consciousness ship. Ben, there's this bit that often happens where, or not consciousness, what do we call it?
Sanity ship.
Sanity ship. So sometimes SWAT gets super into it, and me and Trevor are just like looking at the camera, and then like SWAT will like see our like blank stares, and you're like, all right, the sanity ship has left the port. Like he's just in the middle of the ocean.
Yeah.
So that's different. The rocket ship of enlightenment is slightly different than the
slightly
sanity
different
ship, to be clear.
Yeah, and
anyways, continue.
I realized I worked at a summer Bible camp over these years where you spend the whole 3 months of the summer out in the wilderness with the kids playing games and doing stuff. And the thing that I noticed was like the trees and the water and the rain and the sun, like they were already there. And that the thing that was in the way of like me and my idea of enlightenment not only was the idea of enlightenment, but also all the things that I considered about myself. This is where the sanity ship is about to sail. Where the thing that was in the way was me creating my separation from nature. Was me creating Tyler, the being that is living this life as a disparate thing, separate from everything else around it. And I noticed that when I saw that the trees and the birds and the lake was already in that space of living in perfect harmony with what is, I could feel that interface with my experience of being.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know why I started that, but
no, that's good. And I think when Prem, you emailed me or you messaged me about this discussion, I read like what you wanted to talk about. Like mine instantly went to a book I read in for class. It's called The Curse of the Self by Mark Leary. Mark Leary is a psychologist and from Duke University. And it's this idea that the self is kind of like this impediment to spirituality and enlightenment, or attachment. Like we attach our things to so many things. Like it could be money, it could be relationships, it could be ideas. And like the more we attach ourselves to things, the more we have to worry about them. And then it's like this impediment to like enlightenment because we're attached to so many things on this earth that we never have the room or the space, like you were talking about, to actually find that transformation and that be in that mode of I guess spirituality, if you will. But yeah, it talks about how all these religions, or he compares them, and one thing that's often taught is like the self is often like the curse to spirituality. And so I'm glad you brought that up, because like when I thought of this book, I was like, hopefully I can share about it, because it's a really good book, and he comes at it from this psychological perspective of kind of faith and spirituality, but is more of like a universal perspective rather than just one perspective of one religion. So
I have a question that's totally off topic and then one to get us back on topic.
Okay.
I have this memory of being in high school and we were at track practice, Ben, which you did for like a season just to pretty much stay in swimming shape, if I'm remembering correctly.
I think I did it all 3 years, and every year I got hurt. So so you never really. I was in track, but you never really saw me because I was in the training room.
Okay. Yeah,
I'm so sorry.
Explain it.
I have to pee. I'll be right back.
Prone guy.
So I just had this like flashball memory of we're on the field stretching before practice, and we're just like, just doing the stretch. You reach down to touch your toes, and usually like the way you draw the line on if you're like stretchy or not is if you can touch your toes. And you were like just hinged at the waist, like folded your arms and almost like touched your elbows to the turf. I was like, this is ridiculous. And you're like, yeah, I'm working on getting my elbows down there. And if it was like tall grass, like you would have. Are you still that limber?
I would say I've become a little bit more inflexible over the years, but I'm still I'm more limber than the average person.
Okay. I was just curious about that. All right. So this is just pretty much going to be like re-skinning Prem's last question, but maybe it'll invoke some different thoughts from you. And it has to do with spending time in nature. So now one thing that I heard a little bit ago about travel and why someone really likes it is like if I go to countries with drastically different cultures, especially so like Eastern Asia, like cultures like that, and I spend time, I started to realize like cultural norms that we have here in the States that we just take to be just like natural law, because it's constantly there. And so he's like, well, when I'm in different cultures, now they do it way different. It lets me see it's like there's no real reason that we do it this way or hold it in such high importance. So my question is, in the same kind of way, instead of finding a different culture to let you see things about like our world and our society that don't really like match up with like the way things need to be, do you have things like that you see by just spending time in nature away from the cities and a lot of people?
Yeah. So you're saying is like if there's something that like I get through nature that might be contrary to what is normal in society?
Yeah. Or just saying like everyone's like, this is just the way that we do it, and you can't see it while you're in that situation, but then if you step out, you'd be like, wait a sec, why do we do it that way? Is there anything like that you've found?
Yeah, I think I've thought about this a lot, and maybe I'll go back to one of my posts about just like the busyness of life and everything that we, because in the United States, it's like, you work that 9 to 5, there's so much expectations and normals that are just expected. And when I'm out in, like, you never see nature in a hurry. And so when, like it's never in a hurry, and it always works. Like it might seem chaotic and hectic at times, like when there's disasters, but it's a very fine-tuned place out there. And like I just think that's like the natural order, and like the world we've built sometimes is like so contrary to that, where you get anxiety because you've busied your life so much, but yeah, I think that kind of abstractly begins to answer your question. You want to maybe elaborate a little bit more so I can continue to answer it?
I can try to, yeah. I mean, sort of just like the flavor of this podcast is just all abstractions, and I try my best to like bring it into like concrete examples as much as I can. So yeah, definitely don't feel bad for being too abstract. I'm not sure. Yeah, I guess like if the question didn't bring real specific examples, maybe just don't have any, and that's totally fine. And I'm not sure. I guess it would just be it. You pretty much answered it as much as I can hope for.
Right.
So if there's anything where you're like, you could imagine that people wouldn't question about their lives unless they had the opportunity to spend like lots of time like the people and institutions that where that sort of way of like acting or behaving is like the social like lubrication that keeps everything running, and people just like wouldn't question it, various like behaviors or like thoughts. And it would take, going to like a totally different culture or just spending time away from that to then like see it, recognize it, question it. So it's an abstract question to start with, so you can't really expect concrete answers.
Yeah, no, I
mean,
go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, you please go ahead, baby.
Maybe I'll go.
Okay. Yeah, someone go.
Okay.
Someone had a thought.
Popcorn spot. From went first. I can go, but when you said you never see nature in a hurry, but it still works, I think that was probably one of the top 10 favorite things I've ever heard in my whole entire life. Like,
yeah,
the amount of just good. Nectar of truth in that. It was so sweet. Like hearing those words was like drinking maple syrup, or like pouring maple syrup in my ears. You could meditate with just that phrase over and over. You never see nature in a hurry, but it still works. And the one thing that I get when I sit in nature is the amount of assumed inevitability that we carry with us in our lives. Such as if someone came up to me and says, I failed my test. And the common reaction, I would think, would be like, oh no, that's so horrible, you failed your test. And my reaction oftentimes right now is like, is that a problem? They're like, yes. It's like, how could that be a problem? You simply just failed your test. They're like, what more is there to that? Well, I should have passed it. The path of life should have been something different than what I'm on. And this is no longer working because I failed my test. And I obviously you can go into is that true? how much of a world have you created there? But the amount of assumed inevitability that we have, and a cultural understanding of failing a test is bad. That if you go survey 100 people, you might get 98 that say it's bad and 2 who say, well, it could not be the worst. But that's pretty much all you're really going to get.
Yeah. Prem, what were you going to say? I'm curious.
Yeah. I'm curious too.
Well, I was just going to see if we could because I think part of Trevor's question I think is interesting, that you specifically, Ben, are someone that is a very reflective and meditative person, and you specifically are someone that has found a way to, as you say, make nature part of your life as a necessity. Mm-hmm. So you are someone that has escaped certain conventions of what we as Western people in the United States do. Like, your way of structuring your life is slightly unconventional relative to other people. So there's a range of conclusions or ideas that might have come to your mind of oh, it's weird that we do this X, Y, and Z. And you were kind of hinting at some of them. So I think I was just trying to make that very explicit, that I think that your unique position leads you to just any sort of set of conclusions that I think would be interesting as to whether it's the 9 to 5 normalization of just working, or just any of those I think are interesting to hear. So I think I was just trying to maybe reframe what some of Trevor was getting at, that
yeah, no, that's good. Yeah, the 9 to 5 is a good example. I don't know why it exists. And probably because I'm just young and naive still, and not working a completely full-time job, and don't have as much responsibilities as a 30-year-old. But
who defines what it means to be naive?
Right, yeah. I know, but it's just when you're out in nature and you just start to see things differently, like materials and like common things we would consider necessary as part of our daily life, like a cell phone. Like I took a 3-week road trip where I just was in the back of my car for 3 weeks by myself, and like no personal interaction really, and really no phone. And it's like we've attached ourselves to these devices, and it's like we really don't need these things. And then, I live off of, in that time too, like I had like a 5-gallon container of water that would last me like a week. It's like, why? I don't need a 5-minute shower. And so there's things like that. And then like a house too, like I can't see houses the same anymore after that trip, because it's like they've got an 8-bedroom house, and it's like, why do you need that much space? And it's like I said, it's more stuff to worry about. And so I think those are some examples. And then I think we also get caught up in like having so many friendships and so many people in our lives, and spending that much time alone, you come to realize like life is much more enjoyable when it's shared, but it's much more enjoyable when it's shared with like a few people who are very close to you and that you're very close with. And that's something I've come to notice too. It's like I don't need 100 friends, 200 friends. I just want 2, 3, 4 people that I can share life with. And that is something that I do spend a lot of time alone, but something I've come to realize is like I need to spend time with people as well. So I think those would be some more concrete examples of what I've come to see through nature that some people might not see if they haven't spent a significant amount of time in just meditating in nature, I guess. So
I thought it was funny that you brought up friends. Prem, remember that thought. This will be quick because as we've been going on here, I've been thinking about how can I get Ben more in my life? How can I collect a Ben Schleicher? How can I get a little trophy of Ben and put him up on my shelf, and in the morning wake up and wave to him? And the reflection basically was like, why, like, just love Ben now here. And like, if Ben is going to be a part of my life, it will happen. Like I don't need to collect you to make sure that I love you and that I feel your love. All right, Prem.
Well, I'm glad I'm here though.
He didn't say anything about whether he'd be glad to be on your shelf though. So hold on to that thought.
Well, I was talking about nakedness earlier, so
right.
Yeah, we're off to a pretty vulnerable start, I'd say.
Yeah, I would say so too. Do you feel like this formulation of I don't need to have 100 friends. I do want to share life with people actually, but maybe just with a handful that I can sort of rely on to share with. Do you think that's something that was just made more explicit throughout these past few years, or have you always felt that way? Or like, do you feel like this was, again, are you moving away from something or towards something relative to the past 3, 4, 5 years?
Yeah, I think I've always been a pretty introverted person.
That's why I ask.
And growing up, I had like 4 solid friends in high school, and then when I graduated, like we all just kind of went separate ways. And like I don't have a doubt in my mind that like if I called them right now and if I was in a pinch, they'd come help me. But a different phase, like come to realize like I spent so much time trying to like make friends and be involved in different groups and this and that, and it was exhausting. And like so I started to move away from this idea that like I had to really try and hard and present myself in a certain way to make friends, and then more of this idea of like I can just be myself, and like naturally, like I think these relationships will form that are going to be the most meaningful in my life. So I think so I moved away from that idea of like I need to present myself in this certain way towards more of something like just be myself, and those meaningful relationships will occur.
Cool.
Can I switch gears on us?
Mm-hmm.
Switch.
Okay. So somehow I'm going to anchor this with a question, but it's just going to start out as a little bit of a soliloquy here on photography, because I know that's where we find Ben's, like reflections and everything. So I picture photography, it's something where everyone has a phone in their pocket and they can take pictures. And
Right.
so you see really good photography, and I feel like a lot of people tend to think, oh, I can do that. Like I have a camera for sure. It's like stand-up comics, you hear people like, I can talk. Like, of course I can, but you like
funny.
Don't have a connection with like how far you are from like being a really good something that everyone can do. Like no one looks at the statue of David and thinks like, oh yeah, I can do that, because you don't have like marble and like chisel tools, But so with photography, I picture it like you have reality here, and then you have like bad photography where you're just trying to make whatever you're taking a picture of look like reality. And you're trying to like get there, like, oh, the sunset doesn't look at all like what I'm seeing. Why does it turn out so bad in the pictures? But then when you get good at photography, I imagine you go to the point where here's what reality looks like, but I feel like I have different perspectives and like skills where I can make you see something like even better. I'm looking at this picture on your Instagram from the Cascades on the North Shore, which is a gorgeous park. Usually people that are up by Duluth, they go to Gooseberry Falls because it's like this big, loud waterfall, like really nicely set up for tourism and everything. But then you keep going north a little bit more and you get to the Cascades, like much smaller waterfalls, but just like, I like it so much more. It's like really just like picturesque, like quieter, but like deeper pools of like this water. Anyway, so I'm looking at this picture and I've been there a few times now. I've like climbed all over this place, like seen it from all kinds of different perspectives. And I've stood where you're standing in this picture and I've seen it from all the angles, yet I haven't seen that. Like what I'm looking at, I've never seen it before. I know the area, I've been on that little rock. Yeah, that's in the picture. Oh wait, no.
What you're talking about?
No, not I think, is that Devil's Kettle? It's
that's Cascade.
Is it okay? It's the one where like the water like parts around the rock before going down.
That one?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So my point is like I've stood right there and I've looked where that shot is taken from, but I have not seen that before. And so that's really cool. So, you just get into like the skills that it takes with like framing and equipment and editing. And I'm sure there's a lot that goes into that. So maybe like a joint couple of questions. Well, first of all, so kudos to you for accomplishing that. That's why some of your favorite photos of mine are from the North Shore, places that I've seen before, but I'm now seeing, differently. I like those more than areas that I haven't seen before. So my question is like, when you're in nature with the camera, how does that differ than just like going for a hike for its own sake? And how have you seen your skills of photography develop? Like, can you point to certain things that you're doing, or that's just been like a steady grinding process from like when you started and you can see improvement?
Yeah. I'll start with the first question. If you could repeat it for me.
Yeah, when you're enjoying nature with your camera on you, how does that differ? Like, how does your mindset change than if you were just, going on your daily necessity of being in nature without the intention to take pictures?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I've asked that question myself a lot. It's like, would this hike be the same without a camera? Or would I still do this hike without a camera? And it's like I can't imagine myself without a camera. Like I don't like I go on hikes and I still recognize the same things I recognize and I see things of beauty. And it's like, oh man, I wish I had my camera with me. But like holding a camera and having a camera with me, it's like almost this extra working brain that I have where it allows me to see things differently. It's just like a conscious thing where you're just more attuned to details and textures and compositions. And it's like, I don't know, Swat, you do music. It'd be like going to a venue to play music and then, or where there's music you can play, but you don't bring your instrument.
Oh, right.
It's like, that's what it feels like with me when I don't have a camera. It's like I'm out here, like I need to have my camera with me. And so, yeah, I like it differs in a way that I'm a lot more conscious when I have a camera, but when I'm without it, it's like, there's not really a need to take pictures, so you just kind of sit there and you enjoy it for what it is. It's more of like an emotional intake rather than like with a camera. It's still emotional, but it's a lot more like emotional because you're going to capture something beautiful, and that's a lot of joy. So,
wow.
So I think that answers your question, Trevor.
It does, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I want to stay on that question for just like one more thing. Like, you guys have all gotten like your first car at some point, and then after that, it seems like everybody has that car because then every time you see it, like you swear you never saw that car on the road, but now that you're driving it, you can spot it from a mile away. It's like these cars are everywhere.
Yeah.
Or when I started like skating with my brother, and we would go and find like he has different spots, like good like rails in town, just out on the street. And so after doing that, now when I drive around, I'll see like a handrail on a building. It's like, oh, that's so cool. Like what's the height like? We have space to like approach it, like when you get off, like could you peel out to the side, anything like that, where I would never look at that thing like that. But now it's a different just way of seeing the world. And so what I imagine being cool with photography is it changes your perspective, but instead of just like little things that you're now looking at and paying attention to, it's everything there is to see you're looking at and paying attention to more acutely.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. Like you hit it spot on of what I was trying to get at. So
Wow.
Sweet.
That was really beautiful what you said, Ben. You are such a fascinating and amazing human being. It's such a pleasure to have you here.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I love talking about this stuff, and I'm glad I could talk it with people who appreciate talking.
Yeah. And then Trev, you had a second part to that question?
Yeah. What was it? We went to changing with the camera. Oh yeah, just your skills as a photographer. How have you seen them like develop and change, and what kind of things do you do to help you improve?
I think the biggest factor in my growth as a photographer has been just editing, like hundreds and hundreds of pictures. Like you're outside and you're in the zone and you take pictures. You say you take 100 pictures and then you go back to your pictures and be like, wow, like all of these are trash. 4 of them turned out. And like you start to see what you did wrong, what I could have done differently. And so just that in itself has shaped my photography a lot. Like I'll go to a spot now where like, oh, that's super beautiful, but I won't even take my camera out because I know it's not going to turn out because of the lighting. Maybe I don't have the right lens. Like I just know it won't meet what my expectations are for myself in taking pictures. So that was editing. And then I think like as a photographer, you always get inspiration from other people. Like, oh, I want to try and replicate that. And I think that's what like got like was a motivation at first, but after a while, I think it hindered me a lot in my photography. And so when I started to just shoot things that I wanted to shoot, like I think my photography got a lot better. So I think those were two things of just editing and a lot of time taking pictures, and then just shooting what I like, finding my own style, which takes a long time. It's like a musician, you know, it takes some time to find your own style.
What are your thoughts on like color? Because color is such a like interesting and fun part of a picture, especially if you're editing it and changing the picture to view a certain way. I have this picture from camp of two magpies who are up at the top of a hill, and the picture itself is fine, but I really like what's that, deep fried memes it, and like kind of like went fuck all with the contrast and saturation, and like kind of made it look like a painting. And in its distorted way of that, it hit the experience more right on of walking up that hill and being with those two magpies than just the regular old dull picture of the two magpies at the top of the hill. And so like, do you have any interesting reflections, especially on color? That's kind of the part.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So I don't like, a camera will never capture something as it is to the human eye. The closest you'll get is if you have like a 35 millimeter lens on a full frame camera, like that's about human focal length, but it's still not going to capture the color the same as your eye would, because it's a bunch of glass and metal. So when I take pictures into Photoshop, there's a part of me that like, I want to keep the picture as close to as it was as I saw in picture. But I also, so like I'll do my adjustments, get the colors right. But then there's also the part of like the artistic part of me that wants to evoke emotion. So I can evoke emotion through the picture itself, and then I can evoke emotion through adjusting certain things in the picture. So the contrast, the shadows, the highlights, the color. If I want it super dark and moody, I'll like, you know, adjust the colors so it's less saturated. If I want it super happy and vibrantly, which is not typically what I like to post. I, will bump up the saturation a little bit. And so there's like the realism part of it, and then there's the artistic part of it. And I think you got to find a balance between those two. So yeah, it's always funny, like, oh, like, how much did you edit that picture? And it's like, well, that's the wrong question.
I disagree with your premise.
Yeah. It should be more like, why did you edit it that way? Or like, what was it like in person? So
yeah, that's like when I post my pictures on Instagram with just like my huge dump truck ass, and like the door frame is like bent at a curve, and they're like, wow, how much did you edit that picture? And I'm like, you're not understanding the art that went into this.
Oh my gosh.
Ask why, not how.
That ass is art.
It was just sort of modeling after the reality of curved doors.
Yeah, like you're so narrow-minded about this, and the enlargement of my body features.
Yeah,
like,
don't you know surrealism? Like, get with your artistic
right
periods.
Wow,
that's good.
Do we?
Yeah, so
oh, go, Trev.
I was just gonna say, sort of where you ended a little bit ago, Ben, and like you're just trying to sort of like find your style, and like after what it was you were saying, I just wanted to talk a little bit on when we were discussing our guests, for this first one that has a guest, it was going to be Ben and Ramel. premise friend who takes pictures, but very, very different. He takes portraits of people. And so on his Instagram, it's just faces, bodies, like the whole thing. And so it'd be different. It'd be cool. Obviously this podcast certainly wasn't half as cool as it would be. It's still its own full thing in our conversation with you, but we would have done a lot of talking because you two are both photographers, but the similarities are pretty much going to end there because it's like two very different ends of the spectrum of photography. But yeah, so it would have been super interesting for sure because you each have your own very different styles, even though it's like the same medium of art.
We'll need to sidebar that one for a few weeks from now. So I think that'd be really fun. And I think, again, in general, like Ben, you and Ramel are both just such sweet and interesting people that I think just hearing you guys kind of reflect with each other would be very fun. And that way we don't have to do any more Ben-splaining. We'll just let you guys explain for yourselves with each other.
Oh, man.
But I know you got work coming up. I mean, you're physically there.
About 5-10 minutes, so.
Okay.
Trevor, Swat, is there any other particular things sort of on your mind at the moment?
I've been writing down my questions and stuff, but I've been fortunate enough to ask all of them so far.
Okay, I think I have a question that might be short enough to fit in this time. And it is, what has pulled you to mountains, to the mountainous regions of Montana?
Yeah. Man, first time I saw mountains, I was in, I think I was 8, maybe earlier. And I was actually in Montana, went to Glacier National Park, and then we went up to Banff. And I think what pulls me to the mountains as it did when I was a kid is like seeing something that's bigger than yourself. And being outside in nature that's so grand and magnificent and awe-inspiring and chaotic and treacherous. It's like,
it's humbling.
It's humbling. And like most of the time, like you shouldn't be there. Like you're not meant to be there, but in a way you were designed to, I feel like I was designed to like interact with that and appreciate it, and enjoy it. So it's this like, this confliction in me, but it's, I don't know. It's like, I think for the people who've been in mountains, like, and you do climb a mountain, like you come to learn more about yourself. There's like a sense of, it's not pride. It's more of like, it's humbling, like you said. Like you just learn to appreciate nature the way the nature is, and like that you, like there's so much you can't control, and I think it's just the insight that keeps bringing me back to the mountains. But yeah, and a lot of times I spend it alone too, which a lot of it is just me meditating outside. So it's one of those things where like you don't really know why you keep going back, but you like have to go back. So I can give you like a half answer.
Oh, that was
perfect. The rest of it, I don't even know myself. So I just keep going. I just keep going back because I feel like I have to.
Oh man, that's so great. Well, I love you so much. This has been amazing.
I was so stoked when Prem reached out to me. I've always admired like your work, Prem, and like reading your stuff. It's so cool. And
thank you.
So yeah, and like I'm always excited to see what Tyler and Trevor are doing. Because have all been sweet dudes and like younger than me, and it's like, man, these guys, like, they're gonna do some interesting things like later on. So yeah, I'm stoked to see where you guys keep going.
Thank you. Before we hop off, do you want to plug your coffee shop if anyone's ever in Bozeman?
Oh yeah, it's It's Mazevo Coffee, in Four Corners.
Nice.
Mazedo.
Sweet.
Mazevo.
Any
What's the origin of that name? Mazevo. Is that like a
It's Greek.
Greek?
Ooh.
Greek.
Is there a substantial Greek population in the area?
No, it just it means
Sweet.
it means together.
Oh, all right.
And then the founders of the coffee shop or the organization are Christian, so they just
Classic.
like the concept and went with it.
Yeah. I mean, that's a very
also
Christian thing.
Right. Yeah. Taking the concept and running with it. Also, but your Instagram account, where people can see your wonderful photos. What's the at?
It is at Benjamin.photo, but the Benjamin is spelt weird and it trips people up. But it's BNJMN.photo.
Benjamin.
Yeah, just very short.
All right.
No vowels.
Short and sweet.
And then
Love it.
We sign off by saying see you at Mike's.
I would like to end it beforehand just with saying, Ben, thank you for coming and being our very first guest. It was brilliant. You were great. You set the bar very high for all the guests that we want to have in the future. So thank you, and thanks for your time. And like Swat said, buddy. That is how we end it. So see you at Mike's.
See you at Mike's.
See you at Mike's.
See you at Mike's. Thanks, guys.